Well, good morning. Welcome back to the Broadcast Retirement Network. I'm Jeff Snyder. This is BRN Sunday for Sunday, April 10th, 2022. We've got another great show for this week. We've got members of the media, academia, and financial services standing by to analyze all the news and events. So sit back, relax, enjoy this episode. BRN Sunday. Well, we're going to kick things off with a look at what's happening on Capitol Hill. Legislation, regulation, and litigation. There's a lot these days, and we talked about it earlier in the week. Joining me on the line, David Levine, Kevin Walsh, both are principals with Groom Law Group. They're an employee benefits law firm based in Washington, D.C., and we affectionately refer to David and Kevin as the Legal Eagles. Gentlemen, thanks so much for joining us on the program again this morning.
Jeff, thanks as always for having us. Thank you, listeners, for listening in, and we look forward to a nice chat this morning.
Yeah, and this is a twofer for the Broadcast Retirement Network. You guys were on earlier in the week. It was a sponsored partnership with Defined Contribution Real Estate Council, giving us an further update on Secure 2.0. Kevin, let's come to you because there is another piece of litigation, the FACC case, that I know you and David wanted to chat about.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, so right now there's a litigation going on in Texas and Florida that really relates to the Department of Labor's kind of the color or the spin they put on the 1975 fiduciary rule recently. So in 2020, the Department of Labor released a new exemption, and in that exemption they released a preamble which, said a whole bunch of things about what the Department of Labor thinks constitutes investment advice, and some of that wasn't totally consistent with, that rule that actually went through notice and comment in 1975. They also then released a series of frequently asked questions that, kind of doubled down on this new interpretation of this 1975 rule. And so what's going on in Texas and Florida, but so in the FACC case in Texas is, a group of, insurance-related companies, a trade association, is challenging whether DOL, properly went through the regulatory process in issuing this new, we'll call it guidance for now. And the most recent update is that the Department of Labor, represented by the Department of Justice, and the FACC have both agreed that instead of going through a motion to dismiss, which would have dragged out the briefing and would have left us in a position where, unless it was thrown out early, the case would likely go into next year. They've decided to jump right ahead to summary judgment. And what this means is that, we could see a decision in the merits in the next 3 or 4 months. And it's an unusual twist by the Labor Department and Justice Department because, typically they like to, make each argument they can. And here they're foregoing an opportunity to make a standing argument, which is, you're the wrong litigant. You're not even allowed to bring this case as a single briefing. And now they're going to have to lump together their argument that, you're not allowed to bring this case while also making their arguments in the same document saying, we also really can do the rulemaking we did. We can issue this guidance. So the key takeaway is that there's this case in Texas, along with the case in Florida, but the case in Texas is on an accelerated briefing schedule. And some folks who've been questioning whether DOL's rules, whether DOL's guidance, some of this website stuff they've come out with, we should get a decision later this year on, either weighing in favor of DOL's process or weighing against it.
Kevin, let me just ask you, this is, you mentioned that there's this is a case in Texas. So is this at the federal level or is this at the state level? And then either way, what's the process for making a decision on this case?
So it's at the federal level. And typically when you challenge the federal government's rulemaking, you end up in a federal court for the most part. But that's a great question. And the process for this is that, for now, both sides are putting together briefing on the merits. So they're putting together these, probably 20 to 40 page documents explaining their position and why they're entitled to or not entitled to argue at all. And also arguing why this rulemaking either is or isn't efficient. And, that briefing will be done in the next couple of months. And, there's you can't force a federal judge to make a decision in a hurry. But usually it's a good sign if a judge is on board with expedited timelines, that it means that they're looking to make an expedited decision.
And I don't know, David, if you want to jump in here, but this is
Sure.
a challenge to the fiduciary rule from 1975. I mean, this is a pretty significant piece of litigation, I would think, in your eyes.
Sure. Well, I think it's significant for a couple of reasons. First of all, it's because the Department of Labor, through, if you're looking at it from the plaintiff's perspective, reinterpreted a rule without actually giving the formal notice, comment, all the things that we've talked about a bunch recently. So it really gets to the core of, can the DOL change the rules on the fly, and if it can, how are there limits and requirements that apply to it? And that's a big deal because, as you know, Jeff, we've talked about that recently on crypto. We've talked about it, and Kevin, I know this is going to make you want to say something. Missing participants, cyber, or anything like that. And we make the jokes about it, but part of the ERISA is like a cruise ship. It turns very slowly, and if it's going to start to be in a world where the rules can be turned much faster and change depending on the administration and where they want to go, that has some real serious consequences. So I think it's very important to watch this case.
And Jeff, let me clarify one thing there.
Sure.
So they're not asking for the 1975 rule to be eliminated.
Right.
What they're asking for is the Department of Labor's 2020, new commentary on the 1975 rule to be invalidated. I think their position is, the rule came out in 1975. Everyone understands the rule. We've got 45 years of case law on it at this point. That this couple of pages of text, which is saying this is what it means, it isn't consistent with how folks have looked at it for 45 years. So they're saying, Judge, leave the 75 rule in place, but throw out this new angle on it.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification. My mistake. All right, David, let's come to you because I know you and Kevin also wanted to talk about the president's budget. The president responsible for putting a budget together, I think every year, if I'm not mistaken, and this has to go through the congressional the approval process, right? It has to be ratified by the Congress, and
it's legislation. It's legislation. You nailed it, Jeff.
Thank you. But anyway, your thoughts about the proposed budget from the Biden administration?
Sure, and I know we spent a good bit of time on the litigation, so let me just cut to the quick on this. President Biden, the way it usually works is the president puts out a budget that Congress then does what it feels like doing with it and comes up with its own definition of a budget. But a budget is often a policy marker. It's kind of like saying, well, this is what I think is important, or my administration thinks is important. And what's interesting in there? Well, what's not there? There is a focus as it relates to employee benefits on mental health parity, which is something we could talk about another week. But in English, there's rules and law out there about treating mental health benefits similar to non-mental health benefits, and that's a very simplified explanation. And the Department of Labor has been actively investigating there, spending a lot of time. And I think they had a report that came out earlier this year that said of 170-something investigations, they found something wrong in 170,000, not 170,000, but in approximately all of them. Mm-hmm. The key is that the proposed budget would really amp up the Department of Labor's ability to investigate here by giving them a special allocation of significant dollars to actually continue this focus. But what's not present in this discussion is anything about retirement plans. And I know with you, we focus on retirement plans, of course, Jeff. And given that, I think from our perspective, it shows that maybe at the White House level, maybe retirement isn't the top of the list right now, which also means that probably EPSA and its leadership and the IRS folks who focus on retirement as well will continue probably on their path, but it doesn't seem like there is a macro sort of big policy initiative coming out of the White House. That's the shorthand version. But let's see what Congress does when and if it actually passes a budget.
Right. And so just before we cut to the end of the segment, what's the process there, and how does this connect with Secure 2.0, which we discussed on the network this week and also last Sunday's show?
Sure. Well, the process for the budget is convoluted, so I won't spend that much time other than the fact that eventually there should be both houses of Congress, and you can talk about where everything starts and ends, but the quick and dirty is both houses of Congress will need to agree on spending for the year. They'll either do it as a full budget or continuing resolutions, which basically are ways where they kind of kick the can. But what does it mean? I forgot your second question, Jeff. What was your second question?
Well, I think what does this mean in the context of Secure 2.0?
Oh,
How does
2.0,
that
yes.
relate? Yeah, how does that relate?
2.0 is just a completely different discussion. As we've discussed before, and I think from our perspective, we're thinking that whether it is in June, July, or whether it's after the election, there should be some harmony, that very high probability that Secure 2.0 gets done. The only thing that could really be a roadblock, if people start disagreeing on things they want in or not, you never know. Things could get tossed overboard if there's other priorities. So we'll have to see. But the two are independent at this point, Jeff.
Okay, well, really appreciate the deep dive or the high level on both topics. I think really important if you're a plan sponsor, someone who sponsors a retirement plan, if you're a participant in the plan, you need to know what's coming down the pike, what's under consideration. And if you're a retirement geek like I am, you may just want to be able to convey this to a client. David Levine, Kevin Walsh, great to talk to you. As always, thanks so much for joining us, and we look forward to having you back on the program again very soon, gents.
Thanks for having
Thanks,
us on.
Jeff.
It's always great, listeners.
Bye, guys. Welcome back. We're going to close out the show with a look at the consumer products, technology, and all things above. Joining us now on the line, he is the managing editor for The Street. We're talking about Daniel Klein. Dan, thanks so much for joining us on the program this morning.
Good morning, Jeff. A little earlier in the morning than it normally is for me. As you know, I am in Las Vegas, so working on very little sleep and a lot of coffee this morning.
Okay, well, we won't keep you up too long, Dan, and we appreciate you staying on East Coast time to join the show as you do every week, almost every week. All right, let's talk about Twitter. I want to talk about Twitter because Elon Musk purchased 9% of Twitter's outstanding shares, I guess it is how you would describe it. Give us your thoughts on that. What does this mean? Do you anticipate any changes to the platform as a result? What changes can happen?
Well, so Musk bought 9% and used the filing with the SEC to say he'd be passive, and then roughly a few hours later took a board seat and said he's not going to be passive. So I do expect there to be changes. Musk has not pushed, but certainly openly needled for an edit button. And here's the problem with an edit button on Twitter. So let's pretend, Jeff, I make an honest mistake. I type your name with 3 Fs, and I want to correct it because it looks stupid and I feel bad. That's great. No problem. That's how an edit button should be worked. Let's say I share, I love the New England Patriots as my tweet. And a lot of my New England friends like it. And then I change it. I edit it to make it say, I love Vladimir Putin. Like, you can see how editing can go wrong. And some of those are issues Facebook. You absolutely could do that on Facebook. Don't do that, but you could. So Twitter has really struggled with it, and they're trying to be an in-the-moment medium, but nobody wants their typos to be uneditable. So I do expect that to be something. And Elon Musk has also pushed for Twitter to make its code open source. That I don't expect to have happen. There's a lot that you can do wrong if you have access to Twitter's data, and they used to sort of offer that in ways that they don't anymore. So I do expect changes, but I also expect a lot more people to talk about Twitter, and that's something they could probably really use.
Yeah, and probably we've talked about it, maybe not as positive light in the last several years, you and I and others on the network. Dan, does Elon Musk have a history of being on boards of other similar, maybe not similar companies, but other companies, and being an activist type of shareholder? When you look at some of his previous engagements, ownership stakes, has he been active?
So he hasn't really done this before. Look, when you're essentially the richest person in the world, you can buy, 10% of Twitter the way you and I might go out and, buy an extra big latte. So all of this seems very spur of the moment, very off the cuff. He likes to have fun. He's obviously been in and out of investing in Bitcoin. You could argue, not Bitcoin, but various crypto coins. You could argue maybe manipulating the prices there. He likes to tweak the SEC. So this is a guy that really likes attention, And maybe there's some master plan. Maybe it's also lonely to be the richest person in the world and you want to do things to get people talking about you.
I was going to say, I mean, it feels like, buying 10%, almost 10% of the company, that's got to be more than anyone else, Dan, and gives you a level of influence. So basically, is this his platform? Like, many people have created other social media platforms, Facebook, and others. I mean, is this his platform to use, or would you say just he's just going to make changes for other people?
Um, he's already the star of Twitter, so
Hmm.
I do think he'll think about things that that maybe he would like to have on the platform. But his Twitter experience and my Twitter experience are not the same. So I do think he'll be an advocate for users, but what he's advocating for might not be what the average person wants. But again, attention matters, and he's bringing attention to the platform, and that brings people to the platform. And Twitter works better, as does any social media, when there's a lot of people using it.
Dan, let's talk about attention, and I want to bring to you another story similar. The New York Times kind of rebooting itself, some new management, or maybe a new managing editor, et cetera. It used to be that journalists at the New York Times had to use Twitter. Now it's optional. And in reading this article, a lot of different perspectives on this. I want to get yours in a minute, but one that I thought was interesting is, when you tend to put something out in the Twitterverse, a lot of times you're in a echo chamber, right? You get a lot of, sometimes you get negative feedback, or a lot of people get negative feedback, but you also get the thumbs up and you get the echo chamber. So first, what's your reaction to the New York Times, which is a major media outlet, right? I mean, they're a major media outlet saying, hey, you don't have to go on Twitter. It's optional.
So I think it should be. And I'm on Twitter, but now that I am a manager and not just a writer, I actually don't post a lot to Twitter because, as my boss has said, Twitter can't get you promoted, but it can probably get you fired.
Mm-hmm.
And as a reporter, I would argue that Twitter maybe can get you promoted if you can use it to really drive an audience, but that's an art. It's not something that necessarily every reporter can do. And I don't think, especially when you are a news reporter, and Twitter doesn't want you just like sharing links to your article, they sort of want you to have a take. Well, if you're a New York Times news reporter, you've been taught not to have a take. That's your entire job.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think when you become and we see this a lot with television, Dan, it's a lot of opinion-based television, right? They have a bunch of people and they give their opinion and, candidly, I don't know who most of these people are, and I really don't value their opinion the same way I would value a friend like you or somebody else. So I kind of think this is a good thing from the New York Times. Enough with the echo chamber. Focus on writing the facts, putting things out so that people, when they consume it, they understand what the story is about and can make their own thoughts about it and come up with their own resolutions, right? I mean, that's at the end of the day, that's the job of a reporter or journalist. There's a very different perspective if you're an opinion writer or a commentary writer and you're trying to move people, persuade people to your opinion.
I think Twitter can be wonderful when you're in a supportive community. The financial Twitter world is largely very supportive, but if you do decide to tweet, maybe you tweet, hey, I don't think Elon Musk should be allowed to invest in Twitter. Well, Elon Musk has a lot of fans, and that is not going to go well for you. I do not generally look at the comments on any article I write, on Facebook. There's not really comments on Twitter in that fashion. But I'm very, very careful about it because no one ever says anything good. But if you're in a community like FinTwit sort of is, or maybe you're in a community of a band you like or something else you're into, Twitter can be a really great place to talk with people and build relationships, but it can also get toxic very quickly.
Dan, I was going to say, I'm a big fan of the Grateful Dead, and there is no one who is harder on the band or has been harder on the band than Deadheads. It's kind of a mixed bag, and I agree. I mean, I never go out on Twitter. We post our content to Twitter. I don't go back and look and who likes what or who reads what. We do not have a huge following there, but it is a level of toxicity, and it's a lot easier to say things behind the screen when no one's watching you in your pajamas than saying something to someone's face. I mean, I would say something very different to you in person than I would if we were even on the phone or via text or tweeting at you.
Yeah, look, I'm a big fan of building actual connections. On the other hand, I am a big fan of community. And, something like I keep mentioning FinTwit, but there's a FinTwit conference in a few weeks out in Las Vegas where people who maybe have only interacted in that forum get to meet. There are some people I know through Twitter that I've interviewed that I might hire and add to my team. So I do think there is a lot that could come of it. But again, with anything else, you have to use it the right way. You have to skip the things that are going to make you feel bad. Anything can go badly. And honestly, who cares what some random person says on Twitter? Just be really careful about it.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's like baseball players. We're here in the midst of beginning of baseball season. It's like baseball players or football players reading the sports page. Who cares what that columnist says? At the end of the day, you got to hit the ball, field the ball, throw the ball, catch the ball, right? I mean, that's what you got to do. And if you just do your job, that'll be helpful to the team. So I don't know. I just don't put a lot of stock in what people say, especially if I don't know them, Dan, don't know their background. I think we put as into, our society now is really putting a lot of, giving those people a lot of control and when they really don't deserve it. I mean, who cares? Everyone's got an opinion just like they have something else.
I think it's important to think that way. And again, I don't spend any time on negativity, but if somebody reaches out to me on Twitter and wants, advice about getting started in my field, whatever it is, I am always happy to do that. And look, I've built some great relationships or some mentoring style relationships and use it for what is good for you and don't use it if you don't want to be there. I don't think you need to feel any sort of pressure to be on social media. And I think New York Times reporters probably never should have been on social media because they're literally not supposed to have an opinion.
Well, that's the fault of the managing editor and the managers, right? I mean, that falls on them to police that. But clearly they wanted that because it helped get people attracted to the site. If people are promoting their stories and getting things going, it helps bring people back to the New York Times site, could ultimately help with digital subscriptions, maybe print subscriptions, although I don't know a lot of people who read things in print anymore. So, I mean, I think that's their fault. But just the 50,000 foot view, Dan, is social media ebbed in terms of its growth, its influence, or is it still influential? Like LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. Are we kind of discounting that now that the people are kind of back to working in offices or maybe going back to the office and getting back to seeing each other?
It's still incredibly involved. There's just no other way to put it. Like the world lives on these sites, and people always talk about Facebook being less relevant. There's still the biggest town square in the world. So I think I don't see this changing. I think people want to be celebrities, but they also want to share their vacation photos with their friends and family. There's a lot of good. I get a lot of pictures of my friends' cats on social media. You know what I like? Pictures of my friends' cats. How are you going to be upset about that?
You
so
can't
I
be.
There's a lot of good and there's a lot of bad, and just embrace the good.
Yeah. Well, Dan, I really appreciate you getting up early in Las Vegas for us. Thank you so much. Have a safe trip back to Florida, and we look forward to having you back on the program again very soon, my friend.
Talk to you next week. Thank you, Jeff.
See
Bye.
you, man. Bye-bye.
And that wraps up this episode of BRN Sunday. Have a topic of interest, someone you think we should talk to, drop us a line. And don't forget, for all the latest curated news in lifestyle, wellness, finance, tech, so much more, all in one place and for free, check out today's edition of our daily newsletter, The Morning Pulse. Want to search our archives, check out our latest content? Well, visit our website, that's www.broadcastretirementnetwork.com, and our streaming partners like Amazon, Roku, Samsung, over 100 more. We're back again tomorrow for another edition of BRN AM. Until then, I'm Jeff Snyder. Stay safe, keep on saving, and don't forget, roll with the changes.